outsiders for us. They give the credit to these people for uniting the country or making the country as one. But we know that we have been having this pilgrimage or Char Dham since the beginning of the time, like we are having Kumbh Mela. This is not the first time that a Kumbh Mela has been happened in Allahabad or Prayagraj. Kumbh Mela is there for last thousands and thousands of years, and people used to travel for all the four sacred sites or these other sites for their pilgrimage, and they used or coined the term Bharat. Or Bharat was from very beginning when people used to travel for pilgrimage, not when some rulers from some country or some certain region they came and ruled the country. Now, a society, or I could say art or architecture or culture, it's actually influenced by several factors. One is socio-economic, like the economical, social, organizational, ideological, and nature of environment. People who live in the mountainous regions, they have a different socio-cultural region background or factors compared to people who live in the coastal regions. Geography plays a major role. Places that are northern of this Vindhya, North India. You have South India also. You have East, West, Central India. You have Northeast India. You have so many other classifications. Political, I don't need to explain what was the contribution of Mauryan, Gupta, and Lodi. There is a huge debate about Mughal in current time. Again, Britishers, and if you go south, you will find Badami, Chola, Pallava, Rashtrakuta, and so many. There are contexts like the local ruler, what is the local influence, what is the regional influence. If you see the cultural or religion, you have, and throughout the last 4,000 or 5,000 years, religion plays a major role in shifting or making or progressing a society. Like the parameters or the characters are defined by religion. Like at some point, India was a place for Buddhism, then Jainism, then Hinduism, then Islam or Indian Islam flourished here, then Sikhism. Later, Christianity came. Also, technology, like the kind of raw materials were available, kind of technologies were available. So that we had Stone Age, then we had different ages, then we came to Industrial Age. So these are the different factors, I could say, or the elements that actually influence or shape the progress of this subcontinent in the last 5,000 years. Now, in this presentation, we would be focusing mostly on the northern Nagara architecture, because the topic is Indian knowledge system. And if I say I will cover everything of this country in 3 hours, it is too much to ask. So we will be focusing on only the Nagara architecture of the northern India. We all have studied in your school, like at some point of time we had Vedic civilization. There are a lot of historians, they says these Vedic people, they came from the present day Kazakhstan, or I could say from the bank of Ural River. There are a lot of people, they says they agree with the Aryan migration. Not Aryan invention, because that is politically wrong, that might be Aryan migration. There are a lot of people, a lot of historians, a lot of scientists, they say, no, out of India theory. Anyway, we won't go to that. Whatever information we have, practical information, we will focus on that. Because still we are collecting information, but whatever it is, after the demise, or I won't say demise, after the fall or decline is a better word, I could say. After the decline of your Indus Valley civilization, you had your Vedic civilization. So the early Vedic was from 770, around from 18th century to 1000 BC. When these were nomads, they were mostly using timbers for their construction, and they were using, this was the Bronze Age. Then you had your later Vedic, which was the refined period, and during this later Vedic developed along the bank of your Ganga and Yamuna. And this is the time you had your 16 great kingdoms, or Sola Mahajanapada. Kasi was one of the greater kingdom of this period. How our four Vedas were written during this period, or how this during the later Vedic your Buddhist architecture, Jain architecture, and subsequently your Hindu architecture flourished. We will be discussing all this in this slide. So those who are from Banaras, or those who have been to Banaras, or those who are planning to come to Banaras sometime, there is a site near to the Rajarat, or I could say in a, current context, there is a Namo Ghat. How many of you have heard about this Namo Ghat? Has anybody heard about this Namo Ghat? Hello?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Just behind that Namo Ghat, there is a ASI protected site. And the historical evacuation of ASI document shows this was a settlement around 800 BC, which is a later Vedic period. So if I say from 800 BC to this is 2024, roughly around 2900 or 2800 years. So this is here is still, there are still some ruins of this early Vedic civilization, or I could say Aryan civilization in that area. It is still there. So this is our Kasi, and this is the place or the settlement or the remaining of the settlement that we have. Also, just adjacent to Banaras, you have your Sarnath. That is the place where Lord Buddha, he gave his first sermon, and that happened around 6th century BC. So the timeline, you could say there was a great settlement around this area. I'm talking about the recorded history. Many people say the history of Banaras is 10,000 years old, but we are discussing on the written history, or the history that is where we have found some traces. Now, what is the architecture of these early Vedic people? Because they were nomad, they were using timber for construction. So basically, if I say about architecture, the profession from which I belong, or the department from which I belong, they were living in small huts in villages, because that 3,000 years or 4,000 years back, along the bank of Ganga, you had a lot of villages, lot of jungles, I could say a lot of forest. Now, due to urbanization, we see a lot of empty land or deforestation, but that was the time of forest. So people started using timber, they chop timber, they make houses, and most of the buildings were circular in plan. Here you could see these are the timbers. Could you see this red column, red color circular parts? These are the timbers. So they basically use timbers for construction, and traditionally there are 4 or 5 houses, and in center there will be a common space. So if you ever go to your village now, also you'll find similar kind of arrangement. In the center there will be open space, there might be a kua, there might be a raised platform where people might be playing cards, people might be doing discussion, and in the periphery or in the surrounding there would be some 10-20 houses. Okay, so the similar pattern was happened that time. So timber was used for structural, and mud or I could say adobe was used for the finishes. It was climate proof, and it was the architecture of that time. So some of the sketches of the Vedic villages of that period, and remember this is the early Vedic. Sometimes what happened, the circular plan, because obviously we know at certain time I will be having kids. They might be requiring privacy, and the circular plans become oval, and eventually they become rectangular. There might be few partitions here, there might be a bedroom, there might be a dining room, there might be a kitchen area, or there might be some storage area. So here you could see the circular plan become oval and it become rectangular, because people realize making rectangular because all of your furniture, everything comes in rectangular shape. So rectangular plan is more efficient than circular plan. Okay, then we see how the elevation or how the volume has increased. Initially, it was just like a cylinder with a cone, but later when the plan became rectangular, they started using, they redeveloped the roofing technology. Basically, what they did, they had a bamboo or a timber, they tied both the ends of the bamboo, or I could say whatever the material, timber, with a string, maybe a rope from jute, and they created these kind of structural members. Now you see these are structural members. जिसे आप लोग बोलते हो beam घरों में, ठीक है? So this from the front, here you could see this is a bamboo or maybe a timber, and this is a string from jute or some materials. Later, the elevation of this part, it become sun window, which become a major element in Buddhism and Hinduism. In Buddhism, it is called Chaitya window because these kind of elements were present in Chaityas. And again, timber was used for structural usage, mud was used for finishes. Okay, where are the proofs? Now let's suppose if I'll go to some place, with my family. I'll take some photos and I'll post those photos in social media just to show like, okay, this is the diary or this is the yearbook or slum book. So similar kind of, what was happening in the society. So those, kind of activities were inscripted or, those inscripted in the stone. And we have a lot of architects of that period. During this period, during the later period, you had your great Buddhist architecture. So there is one inscription from the great Sanchi. Here you could see a lot of people, they are discussing, they are doing some activities like business interaction, but in the background there is a facade, there is a building which is having that kind of projected treatment. Could you see this surface or this shape? It is from the Chaitya window. Okay. Again, just in Bihar, close to our place, you have a lot of Buddhist sites. This Barbara Hill. Here also it is used as a structure. This is actually symbolic element, not a structural element. In rock cut architecture, there is no need of this kind of elements. But later this become a major element from this Vedic architectural element. It become a major element in your Buddhism, because Buddhism is the extension of your later Vedic, I could say. So this become a structural, not a structural, but a symbolic element. Okay. Now, if you go to places like Maharashtra, if you go to places like Karnataka, even there also you'll find a lot of architecture of Buddhist era, where this kind of, I'm focusing at this point, these are used as the symbolic material. Here this has no practical usage, but this is a symbolic element, and the inspiration was from the early Vedic villages. Again, when it was extruded, in architecture or civil engineering, we use this word extruded or 3D. From 2D, we use 3D. So here you could see this kind of treatment. Could you see this one? Is it visible to all of you?
Yes, sir.
Even here also. So at some point, this simple, humble structural element will become a symbolic element, and it become a major element in the facades of the caves. And remember, during that time, maybe the king might be visiting these places to meet the saint. So somehow our cultural practices or our requirement, they define architecture, and that become part of religion. Okay. Now, obviously, settlement grew. At some point, these villages become cities, and they felt the necessity of having boundaries. So what kind of boundaries they built? Here you could see a lot of villages, some sketches from the famous Percy Brown's book. And during this time, they created some gates, or I could say toranas. Okay, very humble gate. There might be some doors. Okay. And they developed these boundaries because they were fearing some wild animal or some cattle or something might enter. There might be a thief. So they developed this kind of gates or boundaries. Remember the term thamba or stamba. Basically, thamba basically the vertical element. And there are a few horizontal elements like suchi. And during this time, around 3rd century BC, this was the time when Alexander, he invaded or he came to the northern part of the country. So during this time, there was this cultural influence or amalgamation of Indian art, architecture and culture with the Greco or European art, architecture culture. Now, let's see. If you just roam around your balcony or your apartment or whatever building you live, you will find similar type of railing or boundary in your building. Later, this become a universal element because when European came here, they might have liked it and they took it from here. Okay, this become universal, this boundary. Even in 2024, you will find this kind of boundaries. Now, also remember during this time when Buddhism flourished in India, in Asia, in Eastern Asia like China, Japan, Korea, these people, a lot of pilgrims, they came from these places to India. Also a lot of gurus or saints, they went from here to those places. And when you travel from one place to other, you take some cultural elements with you. I take some elements with me. So this refined version becomes something like this, which you could see if you ever go to Sanchi Stup, you will find this one. And when Buddhism flourished from India to South Asia, East Asia, this became the famous Eastern architecture of the China, Japan. Okay. Here you could see how with religion, जैसे हम लोग बोलते हैं कि when these Arabic people came to India. Here I'm not associating with religion. Arab was there before Islam. Okay. With them, or when these Iranian people came to India, they brought dome to us. They brought arches to us, multi-center arches. The same thing had happened in our case also. When our people went to Asia, Eastern Asia, they took this element, but later this element became a major architectural element, or it defined the architecture of those places. Is this clear to all of you? Hello? Please respond.
Yes.
Yes.
There might be some people who might be arguing, no. These are some mere resemblances. There is no scientific proof. Yes. In that way, there is no scientific proof that our forefathers got inspiration of domes from or multi-center arts from the Arab, or I could say Mesopotamia. In design, many times we try to see case studies and we try to identify some definition, or in history. It might be very difficult to prove. Now, let me say in a different way. In the northern China, there is extensive snowfall. And in snowfall areas, the roof profile should be something like this, which will naturally, with the flow, with the gravity, the snow should follow. But why the profile is something like this? Because it was a symbolic element. Symbolism matters more than utility. Okay. Now, come to the great Hindu temples. Now, there is a huge buzz about Hindu temples everywhere. But this is the Hindu temple of 2024. But it was not always like this. The early Hindu temple, which is there in the 17th century, okay, there is a trivia I would like to add. Many historians, they believe Buddhism flourished in subcontinent with when King Asoka or Emperor Asoka, he embraces Buddhism. With him, Buddhism became the religion of the state. In old days, the religion of the king was the religion of the state. Okay. So under the Buddhism flourished in South Asia, like in our country, till 5th century or motamoti 6th century. Somehow they went into Tantrism, there are other sects, and that was the time during Gupta ruler in 4th century, there was revival in Hinduism. Many people say it is Brahminical Hinduism, many historians say no. They try to associate some other terms with this one. But anyway, let's focus on the architecture. During this period, some Hindu temples or the term Hindu that we use might be different than what it was in the 5th century. But in the early temples were something like this, and it is still there close to the Sanchi Stupa. This was, you could see, this is maybe the later rulers, or there might be some of the family members of the ruler, they might be giving some commission to some artist to build some temple related to Hinduism. But the early temple number 17th, the name sounds very weird, but this is the nomenclature of the ASI. This was the one of the early Hindu temple of the 5th century. Now, the plan was very humble. If I say humble, I mean very simple. There is a Garbhagriha or central shrine. Here you have the main deity, and the elevation or view looks like, don't take me other way, but in current time, a normal shop or a garage looks like this. You see, architecture takes years to evolve. If I say the early Buddhist architecture or Buddhism started around 6th century BC. This kind of architecture developed around 3rd century AD. There is a span of 700 years. Art, architecture, culture needs times to refine and patterns, like resources. Art or architecture doesn't evolve in a single day. It takes years and years. Maybe in few cases, hundreds of years, maybe in few cases, thousands of years. Also, there will be some decline. It's a cyclic process. So if you see, in the early Hindu temples, it was very humble. There was a simple Garbhagriha, and maybe the priest or Purohit might be doing prayer here. And remember, during this time, 4th century, when the ruler converted to Hinduism, or they embraces Hinduism, or re-embraces Hinduism, okay, there are a few other examples from Devgarh, nearby areas, the early Hindu temples, you could see, no grandeur, very simple, again very simple, few or a depiction of Ramayana, Mahabharata on the facades, okay. Another Parvati temple in the surrounding area, okay. Now, Don't get confused with this name, Lad Khan Temple. But in the south, Aihole, in the southern part of the country, there also architecture developed, Hindu architecture. Now let me show you this way. You know what these elements are resembling? The structural timber. These are symbolic elements here. It was the early expression, or I could say experiments of your Hindu architecture in the subcontinent. We saw few very humble architecture of Hindu related to Hindu religion in northern part. Also, there are few humble approaches in the southern part. This section here you could see. This might be Nandi, or this might be the Mahadev or some other deity. And in few places you have your columns in the solid block and few corridors. So maybe the priest might be praying here, the royals or the nobility or the kings, they might be standing here and visiting this place. Now, let's see how the temple becomes so tall, so gigantic. There are multiple theories. One of the theories is like Vedic altar, like we have a lot of Homa and Yajnas. And the shape of the fire, it goes up, it diminishes. Or I could say bell shape. This could be one of the early inspiration for making this bell shape shikhars. This might be in the northern part of India. This might be. Okay. There is no definite proof. There could be some other hypothesis. Or if this Bodh Gaya is very close to us. Remember, this is a Buddhist temple. This is not a Hindu temple. But this architecture is very close to the Hindu architecture that we see in current time. Okay. Now, we know there you had Ashokan pillar, great Ashokan pillar. Also, Ashokan pillar, let's assume Ashokan pillar was in the center. There was, you have this Amlaka or Amla, I could say, and it expanded. It might evolve the great Hindu architecture in the later period. It might have. There are a few hypotheses. The great period of Hindu architecture started from 7th century or 8th century, depending upon the location. It continued and Hindu architecture reached its peak around 11th century. There are three great pieces of Hindu architecture. Brihdeshwar temple in the southern part of the India, Tamil Nadu, Lingaraj temple in the eastern part, Kandariya Mahadev temple in the central part. And all these three temples are constructed around 11th century. That was the great period of a Hindu temple. In the north, we know around 11th or 12th century when Turks or the slave dynasty or Khilji, they invaded in the northern part of the country. During that time, the flourishment or development of Hindu architecture was stopped in the northern part of the country. Whereas your eastern part like Odisha or southern part like the Chola dynasty or Pallava, they enjoyed immunity for another 200 or 300 years. This is why the great pieces of your Hindu architecture was flourished in the southern part, whereas in the north part, you won't find great piece of Hindu architecture. Now, let's not confuse with temple and architecture. Vishwanath Mandir, the newly built Vishwanath Mandir, or the newly built Vishwanath temple where you have the in Banaras, there was another temple. So spiritually, it is a great piece from the religious point of view. But architecturally, this is not something to celebrate. Are you able to understand my point? Architecturally, people celebrate Konark temple. People celebrate Lingaraj temple. People celebrate Kandariya Mahadev temple, which are there for last 1000 years. For me, let's suppose I live in a village. For me, the village temple has same religious significance. That might not be architecturally great. There might not be any grandeur to it. So let's not confuse architecture with religion. They are two separate things. In few cases they merges, but in most of the cases they are different. Now there is another important thing. In present time, this topic might go haywire, it might go political, but let's focus on the history of architecture part or history of Indian architecture. Unfortunately, the great pieces of your Nagara architecture is basically the architecture of the north, and the architecture of south is called the Dravid architecture. The great pieces of Nagara architecture, this is the Lingaraj temple is in Odisha, the northern eastern part of India. Technically, it is not north. Second great piece of Nagara temple is the Kandariya Mahadev temple. It is in Madhya Pradesh. Again, technically, it is not the north. But the great pieces of architecture which flourished in the subcontinent in the northern part along the bank of Ganges, Yamuna, or Indus, they are not standing at this moment. So we don't have good examples of the great northern temples. Now, looking into the Hindu temple of the northern India, or The northern temples they call Nagara, or there are a few other things. There are a lot of vertical lines. Now you see there are a lot of vertical lines. Could you identify these vertical lines? Please respond. Is it visible to you?
Yes, sir.
Or else we will see the next slide. But the Dravida architecture, it is the Kutina. The northern architecture called Latina. The Dravidian architecture Kutina. Here you will see a lot of horizontal bands. And you see this interesting part. Even this source is Vedic. Some people might not appreciate this, but this is the fact. Because when Buddhism spread to the southern part of the country, with them this symbolic element also spread. Okay. In the north, you have the Sikhara, that bell, that ghanti that bell. In the south, you have your Dravida. In the center, somewhere in Karnataka, you have the hybrid of your north and south, that is the Vesara style. Okay. Again, the Latina looks something like this, lot of vertical or something close to vertical lines. The Kutina is something a lot of horizontal bands. Okay. Now let's see the mandala concept. We know there is a mandala concept of Vastu Shastra. It is mentioned there in the Artha Shastra, other epics also. So if in the center you could see, this is the Brahma area, Brahma region, or the central navel spot where the main deity resides. And we believe the most auspicious is this corner, northeast, or this from entrance is from the east. And the early temple had this simple rectangular block where in the center you had the deity. As the time progressed, when the king is supporting the development of Hindu architecture for 600-700 years, he might have asked for some ornamentation, some development. So what happened? Some masses were added in the four sides. So this rectangular dabba becomes something like this star shape. Again, in elevation, you could see it is said the Sikhara looks like a human body. You have your forehead, you have your, this area shoulder, you have your stomach, you have other bodies, just like a human body. And the plan is also like a human. But in the southern region, it is the sleeping man. In the northern, it is the elevation is like a standing person. Okay. Now, let's see the typology of Hindu temples. Broadly, whatever Hindu architecture you see, they could be derived from 5 elements. In the north, you have your Latina style. In the south, you have your Kutina style. Is it clear, or you are getting some confusion?
No, it is clear. Can you just explain the previous one where
yes, I'm explaining. So this is basically from the book of Adam Hardy, European or a English person who did extensive work on Hindu architecture. Here you could see the development, the centuries, and here it is north, it is south. In the Hindu temple, this is the type of architecture that was there in the Jammu Kashmir. Kashmir used to be a great place, a place for Saivaism till 14th century, and it has a lot of snowfall. This is why you have this Kashmira Pasmana temple. I'll dive into this. Second one is this basic element. This is the Pasmana. This kind of architecture that you will find in the western part, that is the Sabarmati temple in Gujarat. This kind of architecture is found there, profound there. This very humble element. Later, a lot of permutation combination was done. This was the now see, this is the Amlaka top. This is the Proto Pasmana, Proto Vallavi. Fourth one is the Sala top, fifth one is the Kutta top. Now, if I show this one, this Latina temple that I was saying, a lot of latas. Basically, you all understand lata. What is lata? लता समझते हैं आप लोग, जो पेड़ से गिरता है?
यस यस यस,
वहां से आपका लटीना आया है, ठीक है? लतीना, नॉट लाटीना, लतीना. सो ये जो लतीना हुआ, बाद में क्या हुआ? देयर वाज वन शिखरा. एट सम पॉइंट देयर माइट बी सम आर्टिस्ट, लेट्स ट्राई सम अदर वे. मैं जैसे आज के दिन हम लोग लेगो ब्लॉक्स बनाते हैं, आई विल हैव ए सेंट्रल शिखर में हर साइड में 4 से छोटे छोटे शिखर ऐड करूंगा. Now this kind of architecture become Sekhari. In few places, they added at different levels. This is the Bhumija. In the south, you have your Dravida, you have your Vesara, and your Dravid language. Let's see some examples. Examples of your Pasmina temples are there in the Bhubaneswar in the form of a Parsurameswar temple. Again, some of you might wonder, we won't find any examples of great piece of architecture, Hindu architecture, in the traditional UP, Bihar, the northern part of the country. You will find those examples in the Kalinga School of Architecture in Bhubaneswar or maybe in the Madhya Pradesh region. That is the Khajuraho zone. Okay. Second was the Lingaraj temple, a lot of horizontal small bands. Third one is the Khajuraho temple. Now, you might read something like Tirtha, Pancharatha, Saptaratha. What are these terms? What is Triratha, Pancharatha, Saptaratha? Ratha, you understand as Rath, chariot. 3 means 3.
Yes, sir.
Panch means 5. 7 means 7. This is very clear to all. I hope you all understand Hindi. Even Hindi is not my mother tongue, but it doesn't matter. Now you see, if this facade has 3 edges, 1, 2, 3, this is 3 Ratha. If it has 5 edges, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it is Pancharatha. If it has 7 edges, it is Saptaratha. Is this clear? We just saw how the evolution of Hindu temples have happened. Initially, it was a dabba or a square block. Later, some masses were added here and there. Later, few more masses were added here and there. And depending on that, this is, you see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Saptaratha. Okay? Now, there are other terms which are associated with your Nagara temple. In the top, you have a Amla. You know Amla? You understand now what is Amla that we eat?
Yes.
You have a Amla type of top at the top. This is very critical for the structural stability of the temple. If this goes out, then the entire structure will fall off. Okay? This central keystone, I could say. Just below that, Amlaka, you have your Bhumija and you have your small Amlas also. Now, if I say this is 1, 2, 3, this is a 3 Rath. You understand how this 3 Rath came? This is one edge. There might be other edges also. There are 4 edges. But on each edges, there are 3 edges. On the 4 sides, let me explain this way. A temple has 4 sides, 4 walls, primarily 4 walls. Each wall has 3 edges. Then it is 3 Rath. Okay?
Got it.
But now you see, there is one Amla. I consider this as a Bhumi. Bhumi means ground. Second, third, fourth, fifth. This type of temple become Tri Ratha Pancha Bhumi. Okay? Might be some artist, he might be trying a different combination. Then he came with Pancharatha Sapta Bhumi. Okay? Because see, the development of Hindu architecture started from 7th century, 6th century, it continued till 13th century in some parts of the country. Not maybe in the north, but other parts of the country. So what those artists were doing for the 700 years? They were playing with the materials. They were making some composition which the king or maybe the nobility might like. Okay? Now you see Sikhari. In the center there is one Sikhar. In the periphery there are 4 Sikhars. And in the corner there is one columns with small Sikhar. Very simple. And you see this kind of architecture mostly in the central part of the country, or the north, middle or western part of the country. Sikhari. Remember this term? Sikhari architecture. Sikhari Hindu architecture. Now let me show you. This is Sikhari. This is Kalinga. Now you might wonder, sir, how this Kalinga word is coming again and again. I'll see that. We'll discuss that. Third one is the Bhumija. What is the difference between Sikhari and Bhumija? In Bhumija, you have all the small Sikharas in independent or in the regular patterns. Whereas here in Sikhari, you have these small Sikharas not in one level, in different levels. Randomly, I could say. This is basically a difference between Sikhari and Bhumija. The second type is Pasmana. This kind of architecture is there in the western part of the country. Also, it was there in the great Kalinga, this Konark temple. Also, it was the refined version was there in the Kashmir. Okay, somehow it was destroyed. You know the story. Third one is Samabharna temple. Again, this kind of architecture is there in the western part of the country. If you ever go to the Sabarmati temple, yes, Somnath temple, Somnath temple, you will find this kind of architecture. Basically, the slanted roof with a lot of ornamentation. Okay? Now, let's dive into Kalinga school of architecture. Kalinga, that in the present day part, it is in Bhubaneswar, Odisha. So it has a lot of temples. Great Jagannath temple, Lingaraj temple, Sun temple, and others. So in the eastern part, there is this Ekkamra Kshetra, which is called in the present day Bhubaneswar. Bhubaneswar is called the temple town of Odisha because it has a lot of temples. This was a great school of Kalinga art and architecture for 700 years, from 7th century AD or 8th century AD to 13th century, 14th century, because this area was immune to the northern invaders. I mean, invaders who came from the Turkmenistan or Afghanistan. This is why the architecture flourished till 13th century. Here you have three types of architecture. One is the Rekha. Rekha means basically linear and tall. Second one is Pidha, pyramidal. Third one is Khakra. It's one of the tribe in Ekkamar Kshetra, which has three small sikharas on a oval-shaped structure. So the initial temples which were built from the 8th century to 10th century were simple. They were less ornamented and they had symbolic elements of different religions. Whereas the later temples like the great Lingaraj temple, Jagannath temple, or I could say Konark temple, they were more ornamented and gigantic in shapes, and there was a definite symbolic meaning. Let's see into that. I was saying this side, this is the place where the great war between Kalinga ruler and great Ashoka was fought. After that, it was a major turning point in the history of South Asia. Okay, this is the place where this great war was fought. And this was a site for Kalinga architecture for 700 years. Just like in BHU, BHU is there for last 110 years or 120 years. So a lot of people coming from different parts of the country, they are studying here, they are learning something and they are going up. So same type of activities were done at this site for 700 years. Now see the timeline and the refinement in architecture. The early temple models were something maybe like this. And the later models become something like this. Okay? Once you are convinced with the product, scale product, you make it 1:1 scale. Okay? So this is the later Kalinga temple. Now see, initially there was one Garbhagriha, but this is the site which experienced a lot of rain, which experienced a lot of harsh sunlight. And remember, the king, the nobility might be coming for their pilgrimage. Where the king would stand? King is not going to stand and experience rain or sunlight, hot sunlight. So for the comfortable stay of the royalty or the nobility, later another room was added. And you could see the finishes are not very perfect. See the ornamentation and see the very mundane, or I could say very simple roof. It is added later. Some adjustment. Okay. So early Kalinga temples, one Garbhagriha. In the front there was one mandapa. In Hindu temples we have mandapa, Jagaman, Bhoga mandapa, Natta mandapa. Okay. In the later Kalinga temples, the Lingaraj temple, in a mature period, you have the Garbhagriha. You have in the front you have one mandapa or one chamber, I could say. There is another chamber, maybe for the entertainment of the god, because we believe our God is just like, he lives just like a human. He in the morning he does this brushing, he does have the breakfast, and he might hear the plight of the people, and there might be some entertainment, some pilgrims might be singing a song, there might be Devdasi dancing. In the evening, again he would be having food and discussion, whatever it is. There are multiple chambers or multiple rooms, as it is in your house. So in the later page, you see this is Bhoga Mandap, basically the place where Bhoga means the offerings, like in the form of some prasad, is offered to the god. The next is Natya Mandapa. This is the place where the entertainer, maybe a dancer, maybe a singer, might be performing for the god. Third one is a Jagamohan. This is the bit internal chamber. Bit close, maybe this is the place where the nobility might be praying or the royalty might be praying. And this is the main Garbhagriha. Okay. Now let's see some of the storytelling. A lot of detailings are there in the form and material was lime and stone. Now you see there are a lot of people here. You could see a lot of people. This might look like these people are very skinny. Maybe it is showing some people from. This is not a very typical feature of this land. This lot of hairdo, this long beard, this narrow chin. This is a very typical feature of the northwest part of the country. I could say the present day Afghanistan. Okay, so this kind of, but here we could see a lot of people. They are praying to the Lord Shiva, and there is some ceremony happening here. So in many of the cases, the temples, they act as a storyboard to express what is happening or what was happening to at that point of time. This is the early Kalinga temple. Here you could see Yaksha sitting here and few other sculptures because temple used as a storytelling board. Now, in few of the cases, because you understand there is an artist or some Karigar or Maharana, that person is there and the person is doing construction for 10, 20 years. He might have forgotten his house or he might be remembering his house. So in few of the occasions, the artist uses some creative liberty to showcase his struggle, his journey from his village to this place. So here you could see a lot of people there carrying some luggage. This might be suitcase in our time. But this is a image of a temple which was built in the 8th century. Here you could see some people there on a journey, on a voyage from some place to some place. There is a place where a guru or a senior is teaching his disciple or his son how to read or how to use materials. There is another structure where you could see a young woman is waiting near a door. So maybe the artist might be remembering his wife or most of it is. And he might be feeling like, oh parrot, take my message and go to my the loved one. So this is a place where the artist was living for years and years, because normally a temple takes 10 to 20 years for completion. And until the temple is completed, the king is not going to let anybody go. Okay. So in few of the cases, the artist takes the liberty and the artist might be showcasing his journey. Also a lot of storytelling or a lot of sculptures of this place. Now, from where did they get all these materials? The materials were from the surrounding area. What you say? Sustainability. The laterite stone was from the surrounding area and they use lime. In today's time, we have this lead rating, we have this lead, platinum, lead, gold, and so many things. But in olden days, they also following the same pattern, what you call vernacular architecture, the material which is available from the surrounding, where they brought the material from the surrounding areas and they built something in a period of time. Okay. Now, obviously, structurally they use stone, and after the stone wall was constructed, they put lime for decoration. Even this is still visible at the Sanchi Sarnath Stupa. If you go, you will see this stone this assemblage or this accumulation of stone, and above the stone there is a thick layer of soil or lime. Now, let's dive into this knowledge system. Stone is used as a prime construction material in religious buildings. Silpkar or Maharanas are the traditional craftsmen community in different parts of the country. Construction requires knowledge. Construction knowledge is transferred from one generation to other through traditional teaching of and training pedagogies. In golden days, artists, they were supported by the kings, the royals, and the other whosoever was funding construction of temple or something. However, and even today also, great art or architecture needs patrons. Art or architecture don't flourish unless there is a patron or unless there is a funder. Okay. So, however, in recent time, the youth of these communities, they are preferring other industries. We know this traditional mode of construction is getting replaced with the contemporary construction styles. Street, also in few of the cases, due to Street Environmental Act, this National Green Tribunal and others, this mining of this stone is prohibited. And this stone is replaced with the contemporary materials like RCC, or I could say brick or steel. And stone craft sectors needs more attention and funding for new innovations. So this is a very brief presentation on Nagara architecture and also on the architecture of the Kalinga, which was a great center for architecture, Nagara style temples. So is there any questions?
सर एक बार नागरा स्टाइल और द्रविडियन स्टाइल का जो डिफरेंस आपने बताया था एक बार उसको फिर से
Okay, thank you. So basically there are a lot of differences. In Nagara, the more emphasis is on the Garbhagriha, but in the Dravida, the emphasis is on the gateway or Gopupuram. In Nagara, these are the vertical lines, Latina. In Dravida, it is the horizontal bands, Kutta. In Nagara again, you have 4 chambers. Now let's see this image. You have multiple mandapas. But in Dravida, this is the Bimana, and the second or the front part is roof is flat. There are a lot of internal columns, but in the Nagara there is never a lot of internal columns. In Nagara there is hardly a water body or pond in the temple compound, but in the Dravida there are a lot of temple ponds. Also, the southern part of the India enjoyed immunity for longer duration, but after some time when this Khilji or his successors were invading the southern part of the country, they started adding more boundaries. And each time they were adding one boundary, they had a big Gopupuram. Maybe 100 years later or 50 years later, they added another boundary. They added one more Gopupuram. So the Dravida temples, if I say Meenakshi, which is a classic example of great Dravida temple, it has multiple boundaries and multiple Gopurams. The outer Gopurams, which are built later, they are bigger in size compared to the inner Gopuras. But Bridheswar temple is a World Heritage Site and it is one of its type. There is another seashore temple. So this is basically the Nagara temple have a multiple shikharas. In Dravida, it is one Bimana and flat roof. Is this clear to you, or shall I repeat again?
Got it.
Okay. Is there any other questions? Hello?
No, sir. We do not have questions as such, but you can say if you can reflect upon the temples in the Himachal Pradesh of the medieval period, they almost have a similar structure of the kind of structures that you have shown over here.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can just shed some light, that is the last thing.
Now, if you remember in one of the early slides, I saw geography plays a major role. Geography and climate. Now, is my screen visible to you?
Yes.
Is my screen visible? Please respond. Okay.
Yes.
Now you see, geography plays a major role. Nowhere else, apart from the hilly regions where you have a lot of snowfall, you will have this kind of slanted roof. Because this slanted roof has to be there so that the snow, due to its own load, it will fall off from the roof. So if you go to the extreme northern region where you have this snow, the architecture is different than the architecture of the plain areas. So this is why in places like Himachal Pradesh or Kashmir, you have a different type of architecture compared to the architecture of the plain areas. Any other questions?
Thank you.
सर एक प्रश्न और है कि
Yes, please.
हिस्टोरिकली डेवलपमेंट जब ये सब हो रहा था तो बहुत सारा इंटर कल्चरल एक्टिविटीज भी हो रही थी, डिफरेंट तरह के कल्चर्स थे, तो उसका इफेक्ट क्या है स्पेशली नागरा शैली पे, अगर कुछ ऐसा है?
Could you repeat your question again?
मैं कह रहा हूँ कि इंटर कल्चरल जो एक्टिविटीज हो रही थी, जैसे अरब से या और भी कल्चर के लोग आ रहे थे, तो नागरा शैली पे उसका इफेक्ट कुछ दिखाई पड़ता है क्या? मतलब चेंजेस कुछ दिखाई पड़ते हैं या वो?
See, okay, I think I understand your question. Let me answer your question this way. Let me go to one. Okay, historically there are three great schools of art. One was in Gandhar region. Gandhar, I could say the present it is in Afghanistan and Pakistan region. There was second great school of art. It was in Mathura. That is in the northern part of India, Mathura, today Mathura. Third was here Amravati. And art leads to development of architecture. Third one is Amravati. Amravati is in the southern part of the country. I could say in the present is in Karnataka, in Telangana, or maybe in few parts of the Andhra Pradesh. So during this period, obviously people were doing trade between the northern part, but the mostly the trade was happening from the southern part, the coastal region, maybe the Calicut or the western part of the India, with the places of the Arab. There is very little influence of the Arabic culture and the great Nagara temple, which was flourished from 7th century to 11th century or 12th century. This is why we say it is original. Now try to understand this is original or this is unique to our case. Had it been a lot of influence from here and there, this might not be original. Of course, there might be another historians who is saying, no, this Aryan migration theory is there. So, many historians they says Hinduism is not the religion of this land. Indra is a Aryan god. And if you go to West, you have Jesus. Not Jesus, Jews, which is in Greek god. Many people says Lord Shiva, it was the Kanishk or it was the Kanishk rulers, Kusan rulers, who brought this concept of Lord Shiva to subcontinent. This might be very difficult for us to understand. How could Lord Shiva is a foreign god? How could Hinduism is a foreign religion? In today's time, we might not understand, but there are a lot of theories. There is one theory out of India theory, which is countering all these theories. I'm just trying to answer your question. So, going by the history of theory, like scientific figures or scientific facts, there is very little influence of Arab on this kind of architecture, because here our architecture flourished because we had stability in the subcontinent for greater period of time. In Arab, there is hardly water, so they go for mud architecture. Their architecture is they try to protect from the harsh sunlight. But here we go for grandeur because there was stability. So my answer would be like, there is actually not much influence of the Arab on the Nagara temple, which were built between your 7th century AD to 12th century. Now let me give you a trivia. There is a newly built temple. Let me show you one image. There is a newly built Kashi Vishwanath temple. Have you heard about this temple?
Yes, sir.
Let me show you one image. Or you could just Google Ganga Dwar. Let me just search Kashi Vishwanath temple. Okay, this is the image that I was saying. Just give me 1 second to. I think I have that photo with me, but just give me 1 second. Let me show you some influence of eclecticism. Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Now you see, could you see this gate?
Yes, sir.
This is the Ganga gate of the newly built Kashi Vishwanath temple. It has 3 domes. This element, I don't know if it is visible to you all or not. Let me try to open you. Okay, this image. No, not this one, but let me save this one first. Just give me 1 second. Or maybe this one. Here you will see 3 domes are there. This is very close to that calligraphy you have on the facades of a mosque. This is a good example or a bad example of eclecticism. Some elements were borrowed from here, some elements were borrowed from there, some elements were borrowed from elsewhere, and a new hybrid type of architecture was formed. This is the architecture. Now you see, this is in the northern part of the country. This might be a good 100 years later or 200 years later, this might become a good example or a classic example of Nagara temple. But never ever it will become a great piece of architecture. There is no discussion on the religious significance. But classical architecture, that has to be unique, that has to be the original of the land. That has to stand against the time. So here you could see a lot of influence of the nearby areas. Nearby means some areas. In this Nagara temple, if I say this is a Nagara temple, because this is the architecture of the north. So, and could you see these detailings?
Yes.
This is very close that you see on the entrance of a mosque. That calligraphy. Taj Mahal के भी जाओगे ना बहुत सारे calligraphy दिखेगा. So this is my understanding or my assessment. You might have your own opinion if you ever visit. And there is a multi-center arts. Since when this multi-center arts become part of Hindu temples? Because Hindu temples are tributed structure. They have column and beam. We don't use a lot of arches.
Right.
The early temples that I have shown you, in none of the cases you will find multi-center arts. Is it clear to you?
Yes, sir. Got it. Thank you.
Is there any other questions? Feel free to ask.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Sir, my question is that the structure of every temple is different. So it has some significance. It's depending on the area specification, and some have some spiritual importance behind this.
I didn't understand your question. Could you repeat it again?
Sir, as you said that all your slide, every temple have different structure or models.
No, actually there are 5 main modules, 5 main elements. जैसे हम लोग परम्यूटेशन कॉम्बिनेशन करते हैं, मान लीजिए उसी आटे से मैं पूरी भी बना सकता हूँ, उसी आटे से मैं रोटी बना सकता हूँ, उसी आटे से मैं पराठा भी बना सकता हूँ. There are 5 core elements. Let me show you those 5 core elements. And whatever you see in the subcontinent, what temple, I mean, it doesn't matter northern or southern, Nagara, Dravida, whatever it is. These are the 5 core elements. Amla ka top, Proto Pasmina, Proto Vallabi, Sala top, Kutta top. अलग अलग जगह पे उसका परम्यूटेशन कॉम्बिनेशन चेंज हुआ है.
सर स्लाइड नहीं दिख रही है.
वो स्लाइड नहीं दिख रहा. ओके, लेट मी शो इट अगेन. One second, please. Yeah. Could you see this one?
Yes, sir.
Now these are the main 5 ingredients. जैसे मान लो यही आटा है, यही नमक है, यही पानी है. ठीक है. आप मतलब बाद में परम्यूटेशन कॉम्बिनेशन हुआ, अलग अलग जगह पे अलग अलग टेम्पल बना. नाउ यू सी दिस इमेज. अगर ये इसी फॉर्म में रहा तो ये वल्लभी टेम्पल बनकर रहेगा. बाद में जब ये तीनों एलिमेंट बने, ये बना लटीना around 9th century, 10th century. As the time progressed, in some parts of the country, maybe in the eastern part of the country, maybe the southern part of the country, it become Bhumija, it become Sikhari, it become Sambarna. In the western part, this Proto Vallabi, Proto Kutta. Now many people they question कि नहीं नॉर्थ का आर्किटेक्चर, साउथ का आर्किटेक्चर, नॉर्थ का कल्चर, साउथ का कल्चर सब कुछ अलग है. हम लोग अलग भाषा बोलते हैं, हम लोग अलग हैं. मे भी हो सकता है. That is a discussion for politics. But now you see, Buddhism is still there in the south, right? You know this, Buddhism is there in south. There is no debate on that.
Yes, sir.
No.
And Buddhism is the extension of your Vedic civilization, because Lord Buddha's time was around 6th century BC, and this is the time of your later Vedic. तो वहाँ उस समय जो Buddhist architecture, that what I showed you, they borrowed some elements from your Vedic villages. You remember these images, these symbolic elements?
Yes.
Is it clear to you?
Yes, sir.
Later it become a prominent part of your Buddhist architecture. Doesn't matter वो आपका मुंबई में था, कर्नाटक में था, उड़ीसा में था, बिहार में था या अफगानिस्तान में था. And at certain point of time इसका वॉल्यूम बढ़ने लगा. This narrow symbolic element become voluminous, जो बाद में आपका ये बन गया. इसको बोलते हैं if it is on a square it is called kutta, not kutta, kutta. If it is expanded it is become sala. This might sound like a slang, but this is the very primary elements in the Dravidian temple. Here I could say, let me show you this great example of your Brihdeswar temple. Okay, this is kutta on a square base. When you expanded it, extruded it, it became sala on a rectangular base. Now you see this temple. Sorry. You'll find a lot of kuttas, salas. There is one kutta, one sala, one kutta, one sala, one kutta, one sala. And there is on the top there is a keystone. In architecture we call it keystone. This might be something else in a different term. Okay. So this is how architecture varies from the north and south, but more or less there are very five elements, and many historians believe आप पूरी खाओ या आप रोटी खाओ या तो आप पराठे खाओ, सब गेहूं से आया है. You understand my point?
Yes, sir.
यहाँ पर गेहूं आपका क्या है? वैदिक विलेज था. Again, some historians, some researchers, they might have a different theory, and we have a lot of theories. But अगर मैं इसको गेहूं मानूंगा, आप चाहे कुछ भी बना के खाओ, कचौड़ी खाओ, लेकिन यही आपका गेहूं है. ठीक है? Any other doubts, or shall I repeat it again?
No, sir. It's clear, sir. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Any other questions? So, how many of you are from UP or Banaras? Just roam around and you might find a temple which might be speaking something from architecture or design wise, but if you dive into the elements, those five elements you will find. So feel free to ask if you have any other questions. So thank you everyone, and thank you to the organizer for giving me this opportunity. If you feel like asking some questions, so we could still debate or discuss, or again debate also, why not? So, okay, once again, I'm thankful to the organizer for giving me this opportunity to discuss about Indian knowledge system, and the topic that we discuss is Nagara architecture or the architecture of the north, and we discuss about the different types of architecture, and we took one case study of the Kalinga. There are another case study of the Khajura or Kandarya Mahadev temple. That is also a great site where architecture flourished for again some 700 or 800 years. So if you are interested, you could look that part. Okay. Thank you.
सर इसके लिए कोई अगर बुक रेफरेंस के रूप में देना चाहते हो, अगर टेम्पल आर्किटेक्चर पे पढ़ना हो?
There are actually a lot of books. One, of course, the Percy Brown book. There are a lot of YouTube videos now. I was just Googling and I saw a lot of YouTube videos are available for people who prepare for UPSC on Nagara temple. But very comprehensive information are available from 2 or 3 websites. Also, there are some information in IIT Gandhinagar or Kanpur. There are some videos on temple architecture. But in general, a lot of information is available. But I would say all the informations are borrowed from the Percy Brown book.
Okay.
Can you repeat it? They are borrowed from?
The book which was written by Percy Brown some 100 years back. Percy Brown. That is considered as a seminal work on Indian architecture. Yes. So, okay. So, shall we end, or are there any other questions?
Sir, do you have another session with us, or this is the?
Could you repeat again?
Do you have any other session with us? Because I feel we have a session till 7:30. So,
if you want, we could have one more lecture, but I need some 5 to 10 minutes break.
okay.
I mean, because I was in some review also, but we could take a small break, or else we could end it like whatever is convenient for you.
According to convenience.
Okay. So thank you everyone. So